Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We want to welcome parents, grandparents, educators, partners, community members to this Facebook Live Q&A all about the COVID-19 vaccine and children. We're all here, you're here, we're here because we care deeply about children. We want them to be healthy. We want them to be safe. We want them to be protected. So we really hope that tonight's Q&A gives you some helpful information so that we can do that. And we've got some wonderful pediatric experts from our team to answer your questions tonight. I first want to introduce Dr. Melissa St. Germain. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is a great forum to share this information with some of our community partners from around the state who we can't necessarily see in person or easily. So glad to be here.
And Dr. St. Germain is the medical director and vice president of Children's Physicians. She's also a pediatrician at our Children's Physicians West Village Point office. And later in the broadcast, we're hoping to welcome in Dr. Sharon Stuhlman as well. Dr. Stuhlman is a pediatric hospitalist at Children's. So they get it, and they have the pediatric expertise to really answer these questions and answer them well and accurately. So we have gotten a lot of questions in advance, and we want to thank everyone who submitted those. Really thoughtful, really good questions. We're going to go through those tonight. And if you have a question as you watch and you think of something, please put that in the comments below. And we will do our very best to get to those during the broadcast and answer as responsively as we can. And if we don't get to it, we will have answers in the comments later on. So we're just going to dive on in to this topic. And I want to start really broad. Kind of set us a baseline. What is the latest with COVID-19 vaccine and children? Who can get it, who can't?
So we had a couple of changes a couple of weeks ago where the Pfizer COVID vaccine was approved by the CDC and the AAP for kids ages 12 and up. And so now everyone 12 and up can get their COVID Pfizer vaccine, which is 2 doses, 3 weeks apart. And those are available in Omaha. There's lots of places to get them. You can get them through Children's. We've got some drive-through COVID clinics through our Children's Physicians locations. The pharmacies, lots of the CVS, Walgreens, and Walmarts in town have them. And the county is doing big mass clinics as well, as they've continued to do since the beginning of the year. Other areas in the state might not have the same quite as many options, but you should still be able to get vaccine for kids 12 and up at some of the local pharmacies and through the county health departments.
We had a question from Jess. What is better for kids, Pfizer or Moderna? So what's the latest on Moderna? And is there one that's better?
So those 2 vaccines use the same technology and are very, very similar. We've seen very similar rates of efficacy, very similar rates of side effects in both of those vaccines. The big difference is that Pfizer has gotten the authorization for kids down to age 12. Moderna's not quite there yet. I heard that they will be submitting their data in June for kids ages 12 and up. So most likely within the next month or so, we're going to see an authorization for Moderna vaccine as well. And if that happens and both are available, whichever one you can get the best or the easiest and quickest is the right one, because those both work very similarly.
So no surprise, the biggest question is about safety. How do you know that the vaccine is safe and effective for children ages 12 and up?
Great question. So the data that Pfizer presented to the CDC a couple weeks ago in May is all available on the CDC's website. You can actually go and look at the PowerPoint presentations that they presented at that meeting and what all their data looked like. They showed in the 2,300 kids that they did the study on, ages 12 to 15, that there were 0 cases of COVID in those who had gotten the vaccine, and that there were the same rates of side effects as what we've seen in the adult population. And so that's a relatively small number for a study, but we also have the 200 million doses of Pfizer vaccine that have been given in the United States so far this year since it was authorized for adults. And what we've seen is very convincing that the vaccine works really well. The rate of efficacy is above 90%, which is awesome for a vaccine like this, and that the rate of side effects, while it is a little higher than some other vaccines, more people who get COVID vaccines get fevers or chills or soreness in that 24 to 48 hours after their vaccine. But we haven't seen any rates of serious side effects that we weren't expecting in all of those 200 million doses. So it's the safety data looks very good.
So you get the shot, or your teen gets the shot. How long does immunity last? And will there be a need for a booster in 6 months?
So a couple things I want to say first, which is you are not fully immune until 2 weeks after your second dose. Okay. So that's when you can, as we're talking about immunity, that's 2 weeks after your second dose. So that's a good 5 weeks after your first dose. So you got to be thinking ahead, especially as we're thinking of going back to school. You got to get these started early. As far as how long immunity lasts, there were a couple of good studies that came out this week showing that immunity was still present after a year. Now, these are small studies again, because COVID's only been around a little bit more than a year, so we don't have a ton of data on it yet. But from what we can tell so far, immunity is pretty good. Probably we will need booster vaccines as the variants continue to mutate. But for right now, it looks like the efficacy is good after a year, and that efficacy after the vaccine is better than immunity after previous infection. So even if you had COVID in September, October, you should still get your COVID shot. You're going to get better immunity from getting your COVID vaccine than you had from previous infection.
So we have a comment and question from Facebook. What about FDA approval?
So that's a good question too. Right now, we are using these vaccines under an emergency use authorization, or an EUA. That means that the approval process was sped up a little bit because there are lots of safety measures within that approval process. They didn't skip any of those. They still did all the steps. They just did them faster than they normally would. And they started their phase 2 studies as they were still doing their phase 1 studies, which allowed us to get that data quicker. So full FDA authorization will come sometime later this year because there are time limits on how many months they have to collect data before they can make that official authorization.
Questions we're getting right now from Facebook also about reports of heart issues or myocarditis after getting the vaccine. And that kind of is this question about side effects and the immune response and what are they, and specifically around the heart issue. What can you tell us?
So there was a few instances that were reported of people who had myocarditis, which is basically inflammation of the heart muscle itself. We see myocarditis with lots of different viruses. Influenza can cause myocarditis. COVID disease can cause myocarditis. Lots of different viruses can do it. And so they put out that bulletin so that all of the people who are looking for side effects would know to look for that specifically. But as they gathered more data, the rate of myocarditis among people who've had their vaccine is very similar to the rate of myocarditis among people who didn't have their vaccine. So it is something that we see, that we're watching closely for, but it does not look like myocarditis is linked to the vaccine.
Another question came in about infertility. What is known about that? What can you say about that topic?
There is no connection with any of the COVID vaccines and infertility, and particularly with the mRNA vaccines, which is Pfizer and Moderna. There's really no scientifically plausible way that could even happen because mRNA can't go in and change your DNA. It just doesn't work that way. And so what I think that's coming from is when people get COVID or the COVID vaccine, their body produces an inflammatory response. And when your body's inflamed or responding to something like that, it changes your hormones and it changes your cycles. Most of us, if we are sick, our period's different that month, and that's pretty common. And so I think some people misinterpreted that to mean that there was something bigger going on, but really probably the period changes are from the body's normal response.
And that's an interesting distinction too about mRNA versus DNA and how it's separate things. So
yeah, these vaccines cannot change your DNA in any way.
A question about from Nicole. She wrote in, she said she wants to have her daughter vaccinated, but the daughter has a history of allergies and anaphylactic reactions, and she carries an EpiPen. Where is the best place for her to get the vaccine safely?
Yeah, great question. And even people who have had a history of anaphylaxis and allergies should still get their vaccines. We do like you to have your EpiPen with you. We do like you to sit for 30 minutes instead of the typical 15 minutes after you get your vaccine, just to make sure, absolutely sure that you don't have any reactions. But really the only people who shouldn't get a COVID vaccine are those who are allergic to one of the components of the vaccine. And so if you've ever reacted to a vaccine, it's worth looking at the ingredients to make sure that there aren't any that might cause cross reactivity. But in general, I would say it's going to be easier for you and probably going to be more comfortable to get that vaccine in your medical home with your doctor, and so that they can sit and monitor you for that 30 minutes afterwards.
One question from a family that I think we hear a lot. I think that the chance my child would get serious COVID-19 is minimal. We've all had it or are vaccinated. Why should a child get the vaccine at all?
That's a good question. And adolescents have one of the higher rates of COVID infection. They don't go to the hospital as often as older adults do, but their infection rate is actually higher than young kids and higher than older adults. And so we don't think of it as being terribly severe, but it is relatively common. And it was in 2020 one of the top 10 causes of death among adolescents. So it's not harmless in kids this age.
Mm-hmm. We've been talking about that a lot in the last year. It does affect kids. Similarly, another question, if I've tested positive, I've had it, I didn't get sick, or my teen did not get sick, should they still get the vaccine?
Yeah, and like we were talking about before, your immunity is better after the vaccine than it is after previous infection. So you should still get it. Mm-hmm. Especially as we're talking about variants, the immunity from the vaccine, especially to some of the new variants, is better than previous infection.
Okay, you are one step ahead of me, because that was the other V word, variant and vaccine. And this question came in, it's kind of like a 3 or 4 parter. So I'm just gonna go and you respond. What does the data show about variants and infection with children and teens? Symptomatic, asymptomatic, level of sickness, or susceptibility to contract it or spread it?
So that was too many questions, Sarah.
I know, I warned you. Not a part.
So they do keep looking at vaccine efficacy as we see these new variants. And what we are finding is that the vaccine has been effective against all of the variants that we've been able to track and measure so far. So even as it continues to mutate, the vaccine is still proving to be efficacious among all those variants. At some point, we may reach a point where it mutates enough that the vaccine's no longer effective. That's where boosters come in, but we're not there yet. Right now, it's still effective for all of the variants. What was the other part of it?
I think you covered most of it. It was asymptomatic, symptomatic, level of sickness, but
so that was a good question too, because a couple months ago there was some worry that these new variants were going to be more contagious, and some of them are, and that they were going to make kids sicker. We haven't really seen that play out as we've continued to look at the data, partly because rates are going down. As we get more people vaccinated, we're seeing the overall rates of COVID infection go down. So it's harder to study when there's fewer patients to study. But in the last month or two, we haven't seen that kids are getting more sick with the newer variants.
Okay. You know this very well. At Children's, we care for a lot of children who have chronic illnesses, complex illnesses, and healthcare needs. And we've had a lot of questions with specifics shared of heart issues or other chronic conditions. Should I get vaccinated? My child has unique health needs. What about this situation? And maybe there's not a blanket message there, but to families who, my child has a heart condition. Yep. What about for those kids and those families?
All of those kids who have chronic illnesses, not all of them, most of the kids who have chronic illnesses are in the higher risk category for COVID disease. And so those are the kids we really want to get vaccinated, because those are the kids that are going to get more sick if they do get COVID. So yes, they should all get their vaccines, 12 and up. I was going to say one more thing about that and I forgot. Oh, there is some good data about immunosuppressed kids, not kids necessarily, but immunosuppressed people getting vaccine. Vaccine doesn't work as well in people who are immunosuppressed. And that's not surprising. If your immune system is suppressed, it's not going to react to anything quite as we would like it to. And right now, there's no separate recommendations for people who are immunosuppressed. They should still get their standard 2 doses 3 weeks apart. As we learn more, we may find that they need an extra dose or that they need a booster dose sooner. But right now, we're just following the recommendation from the CDC that everybody get their 2 vaccines 3 weeks apart.
Okay. And I know I've heard you say a lot, when in doubt, give us a call.
Call your doctor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are happy to help answer those questions.
This came in, how many studies have been done on children 12 to 18? Both my children have had COVID. I'm less inclined to vaccinate them if they have antibodies already.
So right now, there's not any recommendations to check antibodies on everyone, even if they've had infection or if we suspect they've had infection. Really, the only time we're checking antibodies is if we're worried about MISC or if we're worried about complications after COVID. Most of the antibody tests can't tell if you are immune because you've had it or if you're immune because of vaccination. And so there's really not a role in general for antibody testing. But again, you're going to get, even if you've already had COVID, you're going to get better immunity going forward if you are vaccinated.
I have one more question that's really vaccine specific. And then I want to segue to kind of more like the real life, like, okay, what do I do about this? What about all the masking stuff right now? But one more question, because I'm sure there's people watching or who will watch. It's like, yeah, I have a 7-year-old. I have a 3-year-old. What about them? So when is the vaccine going to be available for children below the age of 12? And what's the latest on the research studies there?
Yeah, great question. So Moderna and Pfizer are both, those are those mRNA vaccines, and they are both conducting studies in kids ages 6 months to 12 years right now in the summer, and we'll be collecting data over the summer, including an arm of the Pfizer trial through Children's Health Research Institute through CHRI with Children's. And we'll be studying, I think, 50 or 60 kids through that arm of the study. And they're hoping to have that data available to present in September. So that's the latest now. Please do not hold me to that date because that's a long time away.
Every day.
That was the last I heard. Their plan is to present that data in September, and then it'll go through the same process that it went through for the 12 to 15-year-olds, which is the ACIP group will look at it, the CDC, the FDA will look at it, and if they all agree that the data still looks consistent with what we've seen so far, then they will authorize that for kids down to 6 months.
So based on how it went the last time, you present, it's all good, it's effective.
Then we get to start using it, yes. So unfortunately, it sounds like probably not before school starts in the fall. I don't think that they will be able to wrap those studies up by then, but hopefully by September.
Okay. So now into this other kind of category of questions. We had one from Facebook. My husband and I are both fully vaccinated, but our kids are not old enough to get vaccinated right now. We're going on vacation this summer. What precautions do you recommend? How do I keep them safe? We're in this kind of weird limbo, right? Where we're in families, there are adults and children. So what should people know as we go into the summer?
So masks are always going to keep you safer than no masks. And I think that's something that has become a little bit contentious sometimes when we talk about mask mandates and requirements and things like that. But in general, it's an extra layer of protection. It's having the airbag and also wearing your seatbelt when you're in the car, right? Like the vaccine and the mask is going to be better than one or the other, but especially with those kids under 12 years of age, because they can't get vaccinated yet, they still really should be wearing their masks, especially if they're going to be within 6 feet of people who are outside of their family.
Okay. So it's, there's a little bit of, here's the guidance, but parents have to do based on the situation, based on comfort level, based on all the dynamics. Because we did get a lot of questions about that. They're encouraged, the adults are encouraged to unmask, the children are encouraged to mask. It's a little bit of a you're not modeling, right? We've been told
correct. And modeling does, Yeah, modeling goes so far, and we saw that in the fall. The fall of 2020, people were so worried that kids were not going to be able to wear their masks all year. My kids wore a mask every single school day
They
for
were
the
amazing.
9 months, and did not complain about it. Honestly, they do great. They get used to it, and it's not a big deal. But that will continue to be something that our kids are watching us. So if we are not masking in situations where we're in large crowds, then they're not going to want to do it either. If we are still wearing our masks because we tell them and we show them that it's safer to do that, then they're going to be more likely to do it too. So I struggle with that word encourage to unmask, because I think it's allowed to unmask, but we would still encourage everyone to mask if they're going to be in those situations.
Okay, so this is really unfair if we're asking you about summer and like, when is this going to be done to the next school year? And we were talking like, we need to do another one of these then, because so much will probably have evolved by then. Some parents have heard it's going to be optional masks in the fall. Others have heard no masks. What are you hearing? And do you have a recommendation related to those elementary kids, preschool kids, etc.?
So the American Academy of Pediatrics put out another statement this week, basically just reaffirming that if you are not vaccinated, you should be wearing a mask. And that right now includes all kids under 12. No one wants to hear that. And the parents of kids are not super happy that kids have kind of sort of been left to the side a little bit when they've come out with some of this guidance regarding masks, but it is still safer for them to do so. When you talk about, again, mask mandates and requirements, those are generally set by the school district if it's in school, and sometimes by the city in terms of Omaha, or sometimes by the county health departments. So there's lots of different avenues that those requirements can be set, but in general, if you are not vaccinated, you should be wearing a mask. And unfortunately, I think that will still be kids, at least as we start school in the fall, that they should be wearing their masks if they can't be vaccinated yet.
And as we're wrapping up the school year, a lot of them have already wrapped. It seems really appropriate to say, like, shout out and a round of applause for the school districts. All of our partners in the schools have been so amazing. I mean, they're on the front lines. And they've been so incredible and adaptable and to do anything for the kids they serve. So
absolutely. And we've really seen how resilient some of those schools and the kids can be, and have been able to stay in person for a large chunk or the whole year because we put all these precautions in place. If
masks are optional in the fall, this is a fall question again, will my elementary age child's mask be enough to protect them indoors around other children who are also unvaccinated but may be unmasked?
That's a really tough question to answer. I can tell you that the mask will prevent most respiratory particles from getting in, not 100% of them. If someone coughs in your face and they have active COVID, that might not be enough to protect you from getting sick, but it certainly decreases the spread a lot. And I think we'll still have to do some screening protocols, maybe not quite as diligent as we were this year, but it'll still be important to at least self-screen at home. Don't send your kid to school if you're not sure what's going on with them quite yet, if they've had that fever or that cough. I think the schools will continue to encourage everyone to self-screen and stay home and get tested if you're not sure. And hopefully we'll see more testing within the schools and the communities in the fall too, because that really, the quicker we can pick up those positives and get them home and out of the general public, the quicker we can stop these outbreaks.
Mm-hmm. This is a really good practical question. We got a question about sanitizing surfaces. You know, there was everybody who's getting not only the hand sanitizer, but all the Lysol and the Clorox. Does it make sense to do all this extra sanitation of surfaces if 95% or more, I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what the questioner asked, is transmitted by respiratory means?
So most COVID is transmitted through droplets. But there are lots of other viruses that live on surfaces. As we saw in Omaha this spring, norovirus is not killed by hand sanitizer and is not killed by some normal cleaning methods. And so I think some of these cleaning protocols will stay in place, and for good reason, because they do prevent the spread of lots of different viruses, not just COVID.
Recap, if I'm a parent and I want to schedule a vaccine appointment, how do I schedule that with children's or otherwise?
Yeah, so children's, we still have, I think, 5 more drive-through COVID vaccine clinics scheduled within the next couple weeks. And if you're a children's physician's patient, you can call your doctor. If you're not, you can call 402-955-SHOT, and that will get you hooked up with the people who can get you registered and signed up for one of those clinics. If you're outside of our area, the health department website should have the list of locations around you that you can go to get vaccinated, and then local pharmacies, and it's always best to call ahead if you're not sure, but really any of those pharmacies that are carrying Pfizer vaccine right now should be able to vaccinate those ages 12 and up.
A couple more questions just came in. Is there cause to be concerned just due to the inability to complete long-term testing of possible side effects? You know, it's been a whirlwind since 2020. So any thoughts on that question?
So I was encouraged to read in the whole history of vaccines, all of the vaccines that we've ever studied and given, and maybe even don't give anymore, there have never been any serious side effects that showed up after the first 2 months. Anytime there have been serious side effects that showed up with vaccinations, it's been within the first 2 months. And we've been vaccinating people now for 5 months. So I think that's a pretty good indication. And again, hundreds of millions of doses, and 200 million was just in the US. So we've also got the data from lots of other countries that have been vaccinating too. We haven't seen any serious side effects that we weren't prepared for.
That's good context. Another question is, how long are people protected by antibodies if they've had COVID?
Great question. So far,
they're so good. They're all the ones.
So far, so good. Yeah, they keep testing. I mean, they're just continuing to monitor those people who first had it, who are willing to continue to get blood drawn to check for antibodies. But so far, we have seen antibodies persist for at least a year.
So I think that's it for the questions live. I just want to ask you as a pediatrician, like, what are you hearing right now? And what encouragement would you give to parents? I mean, this has been a heck of a year, right? And it's not over. It's not over. What are you hearing? And I guess, how would you what's your charge to those watching?
So I think that it is, and we got to this about in the middle of this broadcast, but it's not that bad for kids, and why do they need it? And so I think just really, you know, it's safety like anything else. Are you going to get in a car accident on your drive home tonight? Probably not, but you still have to put your seatbelt on, because that's still a way that we can keep you safe, and keep everyone around you safe too. And so I think just really recognizing that, yes, you might have a day or so of sore arm or not feeling great or needing a nap, and that's way better than you would feel if you were to get COVID. And so it's an ask for everybody, but it's not a huge ask. It's 2 shots, 3 weeks apart. You can do it.
And kids are so resilient. They've been amazing. Talking to kids in that drive-up vaccine clinic last week, it was just like, they're so responsible and mature about it. You know, they're like, I want to protect my community and my family, and it's really inspiring. So thank you, Dr. St. Germain, for sharing the answers in a really real and easy to understand way. It's been really helpful. And thank you everybody who submitted really good questions, for watching, whether you're watching now or later. We just hope you got a nugget, some information that's helpful to you as you just want to do what's right for your child, right? So remember that you can check out children'somaha.org/COVID vaccine. That's where we have all the details about vaccination clinics. And we even have a video with Dr. Mel about the vaccine safety and efficacy. So if you want to send it to a friend or neighbor. So check that out. And again, the phone number to call is 402-955-SHOT. So thank you again, Dr. Mel. Thanks for watching us. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.